Okay, welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we're going to actually continue on from the question we got from a viewer, which was how do I determine how to move on to the next stone? So that was a really interesting question, but when I got it, I decided that it needs to be broken into two categories. One category is edge sharpening, and the other category would be surface sharpening or polishing. So in the previous video, we covered edge sharpening. We started from 200 grit and went all the way through the stone progression to natural stones and finished with natural stones. And if you didn't watch it, you can go back and take a look at it. So today we're going to start a new series about surface sharpening or polishing. And it's going to cover some of the things that we talked about in the last video about what I'm looking for when I go from stone to stone, but this is going to be focused more on surface polishing and sharpening, and we'll also include some other things in there that we've been asked about, like kasumi finishing and also Hamaguri. So in this series I decided to use a Mazaki Gyuto, Kurouchi White 1 Gyuto. I received this Gyuto from a customer who had asked for it to be repolished. So we're going to go through the stages of doing that. So just to give a quick overview of what we're going to cover in this series, we're going to start off by just checking the blade and determining what needs to be done to it. It needs to be straightened, those kind of things, before we actually move on to the stones. After that, we're going to go through 200, 400, 800, 1000, 1500 possibly, and then 3000 and 6000, and then we're going to go on to one or two different type of natural stone. So before we start doing any sharpening, we need to actually look at the blade first to determine if there's any problems with the blade. Now this is really important because if you start sharpening without actually checking anything, whether it's straight or not, how the edge shape is, you can run into a lot of problems, especially during rough sharpening, but also those problems can't be corrected when you are in the polishing stage. So looking at the blade, checking it, and correcting everything before you're sharpening is really important. So we're going to start off with that. So let's take a look at the blade that we're going to be working on. So this is a Mazaki Gyuto, Kurouchi, has a wide bevel. I did actually put it onto the stones just a bit, just to kind of see where things are at. So that's why you can see these different scratch marks. And so let's go through the different things I need to look at before we actually start sharpening. I'd like to do a couple of things first just to kind of determine what the blade is actually like. So I'm going to measure the blade first just to see the length and also the heel height. So we're looking at the edge length it's over 240 at the edge length. And now we're going to just take a look at the heel height. And this is really important because we want to keep as much heel height as possible during sharpening. And the heel height is at 53.5. So after that, we kind of want to look at the blade and what we want to do. So some of the first things we want to look at are, is the blade straight, and is the edge shape, the edge geometry, how is that? So let's just look at the blade and determine what needs to be done. First of all, this blade has a wide bevel, and customer actually asked if the bevel could be raised a bit. So we're going to raise this bevel and even it out up to here, about here. After that, we're going to smooth out both sides of the wide bevel, and then we need to now look at, is the blade actually straight? So we're going to start off first with looking at the blade and determining the straightness of the blade. And how we're going to do that is by looking from the heel to the tip and back, and the same thing looking from on the spine from this area here, machi, to the tip and back. So I like to kind of use a different types of light source to see directly on the edge of the blade. I want to get it illuminated from some light source, so I can really get a really clear visuals on the straightness of the blade. So we're just going to look here and see what's going on. So initially what I'm seeing is that right at the heel, the blade is slightly bent going to my left. Then as it moves along right in the center of the blade, there's a slight bend that's pushed out also to the left. Then it moves over to the right and kind of comes back, twists back a bit to center again near the tip. So all those things need to be corrected before we do any work at all. We can also check this way too, just to kind of really make sure what we're seeing from this way, from the heel, is actually accurate, and it is. From around this area here to the tip, it's bent slightly towards my right. And looking at it from this way, and you often find this is when you look at from the spine, actually it looks fine. And from looking at this way, we can see that it's bent a bit from here to here. So all those things need to be corrected, and it is quite a thin blade from here to here, so we've got to really take a lot of care when we're straightening it out. So the next thing we want to check is the edge geometry, the edge shape. What I mean by that is the shape of the actual blade at the edge, and that's really for performance. So how I like to do that is by looking again from the heel to the tip on the blade on this angle. That gives me a really good viewpoint running down the blade, and same thing from the tip to the heel. And what I'm seeing here is that there is an area around here that's actually a little bit overground here, going like this. So it looks to be that on a cutting board it may only be touching at these 2 points. So the way I like to really focus in on that, get a clear visual of that, is by using a metal plate. So I like to use this iron plate that's dead flat. It's really easy to get a visual with the daylight coming in from behind us. So I'll put the blade on this plate and kind of simulate if I'm cutting, and then take a look at where it lands, where it rests. And as I thought, it's only touching in 2 points. So all that's got to be corrected with the straightening as well before we go into any sharpening. So we checked the blade, we went over everything, we determined what needs to be done to the blade now before we go on to the 200 grit stone. So what I'm going to do now is go over those repairs, and then we're going to come back and start on the 200 grit stone. Okay, so we fixed the blade and repaired a few of the minor issues that were there. One was straightening the blade. Now it's nice and straight. The other one was there was 2 points here that were touching the board, but an area in the center that wasn't. So that was all smoothed and evened out. And after that, I just refined the rest of the blade geometry so it all kind of flowed together so that the performance is even and a really nice cutting feeling on the cutting board. After that, we're going to go now on to the 200 grit stone. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the actual sharpening. We're going to be using the NSK Kogyo Oboro knife 200 grit stone. And we're going to actually start on this side of the blade. Right here, in this area here, the shinogi line comes down a lot further than it is on the other side. So that's going to be the first area we want to address. Once we kind of get this evened out and smooth, we're going to actually do about 60% on this side and then switch back and forth, back and forth. I tend to do that because what I find is that if you just only work on one side and then go to the other side, you can sometimes, not always, but sometimes you can get a little bit of movement in the blade. So we want to minimize that by working evenly on both sides.
How is it, Ivan?
So yeah, some initial thoughts. I started on this side because I wanted to raise the shinogi line out about a few millimeters, definitely. In this area is quite a high spot. It's pretty flat all the way here, but then comes up quite a bit and then really swoops down here. So in this area is the area we're really kind of focusing in right now, kind of working our way this way so that the stonework will eventually come all the way to the heel. But right now really focusing on here, spreading it out so that everything is touching. Once we get that work done, then we can start putting in some more shape, a little bit of angles here, and then we'll come back to this side, but yeah, initially this is the real area we got to think about. Let's try Hokuto. 200. Nope. Oboro was better for this knife. Wow, much more aggressive. Okay, we just finished the work on the 200 grit stone, and now we're going to move on to the 400 grit stone. But before we do that, let's go over a few of the points that I'm looking for before I move on to the next stone. First key points are, the edge geometry is how I want it. It's perfect. It's straight, it hasn't moved in any direction, which it is. Then after that, the next thing I'm looking for is very consistent scratch pattern across the surface of the blade road. You can tell this by an even and clear color. You can also tell this by checking in a light source. You can see light moving across the blade road to check if there's any high or low spots or there's any areas you need to correct. The other things I look for is that I have hit the heel area and the tip. I've also hit the, in this case, shinogi line. Another thing I like to look for, me personally, is I want to see a very clear cladding line across this type of blade. For honyaki, of course, it's different, but for this type of blade, I really want to see that a clear differentiation between hard and soft steel. If all those things are there, then I'm pretty happy, and then I'm going to be ready to move on to the 400 grit stone. So we finished all the work on the 200 grit stone, and now the next process is going to be moving on to the 400 grit stone. In the next video, in the next process of this, we're going to be covering a few different things. We're going to, of course, remove all the scratches from the 200 grit stone, and then we're going to start shaping. The shaping is going to involve evening out and smoothing everything on the blade road, but also kind of cutting in, shaping a convex or hamaguri near to the edge. So one interesting thing about this blade, when I first put it onto the stones, I noticed that there actually was a slight hamaguri shaped into this blade, which is really nice to see because I don't often see that. But unfortunately, taking care of some of the issues on the blade road and also widening the blade road, we had to remove the hamaguri. So in the next video, we're going to actually start to reestablish that. So if you really like this content and I was able to cover a lot of interesting stuff in this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.